Ethan Cross had visited 12 inhabited worlds during his years as a police officer, but Verlia immediately secured a place on his personal list of the strangest. The list had previously been led by a moon where parking violations were settled through competitive poetry. Verlia surpassed it within the first hour. His shuttle descended through layers of silver clouds illuminated by floating rings of blue energy below. Enormous cities hovered above the planet's surface, supported by gravity engines that glowed like artificial stars. Thousands of aerial vehicles moved between crystal towers while holographic advertisements drifted across the sky. One advertisement showed a smiling alien selling breakfast. Another showed the same alien selling laser rifles. Apparently the local marketing department believed in versatility. Ethan stepped out of the shuttle and adjusted the collar of his dark uniform. Around him, countless alien citizens moved through the gigantic transit hub. Most looked remarkably human, except for their long ears, which varied in shape and size. Some curved upward elegantly, others pointed sharply backward. He had spent the last 3 days studying local customs. Unfortunately, none of those lessons explained why someone was walking a floating cube on a leash. The cube barked. Ethan decided not to ask questions. His assignment on Verlia was simple: a 6-month exchange program between planetary police departments. Learn local procedures, share human investigative methods, avoid diplomatic incidents. The last requirement seemed particularly important. A gentle electronic voice echoed from above. Welcome to Veralia. Please refrain from starting interstellar conflicts inside the terminal. Ethan blinked. A second announcement followed. Repeat reminder: last week's incident was not amusing. He found himself laughing. Perhaps he was going to enjoy this place. Several hours later, after checking into temporary housing provided by the government, Ethan decided to explore one of the capital city's commercial districts. The streets were alive with light. Transparent walkways crossed between towering structures. Delivery drones zipped overhead carrying glowing containers. Artificial waterfalls cascaded down the sides of buildings covered in living metallic plants. Everything felt futuristic and impossibly advanced. Everything except the police officers. They looked exactly the same: tired expressions, serious faces, people avoiding eye contact. Apparently, law enforcement was universal. As Ethan crossed a crowded plaza, a calm voice called out behind him. Excuse me, sir. He turned. An alien policewoman approached through the crowd. She appeared to be around his age. Long silver blonde hair rested over her shoulders and her elegant pointed ears extended beyond it. Her violet eyes studied him with professional curiosity. The name plate on her uniform read Lyra Voss. Good afternoon, she said politely. Routine identification check. Ethan smiled. Already? I've only been here half a day. Lyra shrugged. You'd be surprised. Yesterday we detained a tourist attempting to smuggle 3 illegal gravity chickens. Ethan stared. Gravity chickens? They were escaping. How? They could fly. After a pause, both of them laughed. Lyra activated a small scanning device. If you'll present your identification. Ethan handed over his credentials. The scanner emitted a soft blue glow. For a moment nothing happened. Then the device produced a sharp electronic tone. Lyra frowned. The scanner flashed red. then gold, then bright white. Her expression changed, confusion, disbelief, shock. She looked at the scanner, then at Ethan, then back at the scanner. The color slowly drained from her face. What? Ethan asked. Lyra's eyes widened. The device slipped from her fingers. It hit the ground. Around them, nearby pedestrians stopped walking. The scanner projected a holographic symbol above the plaza. An ancient crest rotated slowly in the air. Several citizens gasped. One elderly alien nearly dropped his shopping bags. Lyra took a slow step backward. Her voice emerged as barely more than a whisper. No. Ethan felt every eye in the plaza turning toward him. The young policewoman suddenly pointed directly at him. Then she shouted loudly enough for half the district to hear. It's the Great Warrior. Silence crashed across the plaza, and 1,000 astonished faces turned toward Ethan Cross. For several seconds, Ethan was convinced there had been a misunderstanding. Unfortunately, the crowd seemed very confident that there had not. The elderly alien, who had nearly dropped his shopping bag, suddenly fell to one knee. Then another citizen did the same. Within moments, dozens of people across the plaza were kneeling. Ethan looked around helplessly. Please, don't do that. More people knelt. I specifically asked you not to. Even more knelt. A nearby child pointed excitedly. He's so humble. The crowd murmured in agreement. Ethan closed his eyes. This was somehow getting worse. Lyra stood frozen beside him, staring at the holographic crest floating above the scanner. I don't understand, she whispered. What exactly am I supposed to be? Ethan asked. Lyra slowly turned toward him. The greatest warrior in our recorded history. That's impossible. I agree. Good, but the scanner doesn't. That's less good. The crowd continued growing. News drones descended from the sky like curious metallic birds. Their cameras immediately focused on Ethan. One drone projected a glowing headline above the plaza: Legendary Hero Returns. Another appeared beside it: Great Warrior Found During Routine. Pew. A third one displayed: Officer Lyra Voss completes most important ID check-in history. Lyra groaned. My supervisor is never going to let me hear the end of this. Before Ethan could answer, several sleek vehicles descended from above and landed near the plaza. The atmosphere changed instantly. The crowd became quiet. Their doors opened. Unformed government officials emerged. Scientists followed, then military officers, then even more scientists. Apparently, scientists were very popular during emergencies on Verlia. A tall woman with silver robes stepped forward. Her long ears were decorated with glowing rings of blue crystal. She studied Ethan carefully. Officer Ethan Cross of Earth. That's me. She glanced at a tablet. Human police officer. Also me. The woman frowned. Not ancient warrior. Definitely not me. Several scientists exchanged confused looks. One of them whispered, Blucky. That's exactly what the great warrior would say. Ethan looked toward the sky. Why is everyone helping make this worse? Within minutes he was escorted into one of the vehicles. Lyra was ordered to accompany him. The transport rose above the city and accelerated through streams of traffic suspended between the floating districts. Ethan stared out the window. The capital was even more beautiful from above. Massive energy bridges connected entire sections of the city. Artificial suns illuminated Lower districts hidden beneath cloud. Layers far in the distance enormous. Orbital elevators stretched into the heavens despite everything happening. Around him he couldn't help feeling impressed. Then he noticed Lyra sitting. Silently she looked nervous. Hey, she glanced up. You okay? No, fair. She hesitated. I'm sorry. For what? For shouting. Ethan laughed. You mean the part where you announced I was some legendary dead warrior to half the planet? Her face re-ended. Yes, honestly. I've had worse introductions. That finally made her smile. The vehicle entered a protected air corridor. Outside, escort ships appeared. Lots of escort ships. Ethan counted 12, then 20. Then gave up. Are all these for us? Lyra nodded. Normally government escorts are smaller. How much smaller? Usually 0. The transport continued toward the central government district. Meanwhile, every screen visible through the windows seemed to display the same thing. His face. News anchors debated theories. Historians appeared on panels. Citizens gave emotional interviews. One elderly man was openly crying. I always believed he would return. Ethan pointed at the screen. I've never met that man in my life. He probably hasn't met you either. Lyra said. The transport finally arrived at a massive structure suspended above the city, the Hall of Records, a place where centuries of Varillian history were preserved. As Ethan stepped out, he noticed hundreds of officials waiting. Scientists, politicians, military leaders, historians. Everyone looked at him as if he were a ghost. A strange feeling settled in his chest. For the first time, the situation stopped feeling ridiculous because these people weren't pretending. They genuinely believed something impossible had happened, and judging by the expressions on their faces, they were terrified as much as they were hopeful. Somewhere inside the Hall of Records, answers were waiting, but Ethan was beginning to suspect he wasn't going to like them. The Hall of Records was larger than some cities Ethan had visited. The structure floated above the capital like a silver mountain suspended in the sky. Inside, millions of glowing data crystals stretched upward through enormous chambers illuminated by soft blue light. Transparent elevators moved silently between levels, while countless holographic displays projected fragments of history into the air. Ethan followed a group of officials through a corridor wide enough to fly a shuttle through. Do you keep all your records here? He asked. One historian nodded proudly. Only the important ones. Ethan looked around. How many records are there? The historian smiled. Approximately 812 billion. Ethan stopped walking. The historian continued. Not including backups. Ethan immediately resumed walking. Some numbers were simply not worth thinking about. Lyra walked beside him occasionally, receiving nervous messages through her wrist communicator. Every few minutes, she glanced at Ethan as if checking whether he had suddenly transformed into a legendary warrior. Unfortunately for her investigation, he still looked like a tired police officer. They eventually entered a circular chamber filled with advanced scanning equipment. Dozens of scientists were already waiting. The moment Ethan stepped inside, everyone became silent. That silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then every scientist began speaking at once. Run another genetic analysis. Verify the historical sequence. Check the neural markers. Activate the quantum archive. Somebody get coffee. The final request seemed particularly urgent. Ethan sat in a chair while scanners moved around him. Blue beams swept across his body. Holographic displays filled the air. Minutes passed. Then an elderly scientist suddenly gasped. The room froze. What? Another scientist asked. The old man stared at his screen. Matches complete. Nobody moved. Ethan frowned. How complete? The scientist swallowed. 99.99. 999%. The room exploded into noise. Several researchers nearly fell out of their chairs. One woman dropped her tablet. Another began laughing hysterically. Third scientist simply sat down on the floor and stared into space. Ethan raised a hand. I feel like everyone is reacting very strongly to numbers. Nobody listened. Lyra stepped closer to one of the displays. What exactly does that mean? The elderly scientist looked at her. It means Officer Cross possesses the exact genetic signature of Archon Val. The room became quiet again. Ethan could feel the weight of the name. Who was he? Ethan finally asked. Several people looked shocked. One historian nearly fainted. You don't know? I've been on your planet for less than a day, the historian collected himself. Archon Val ended the void wars, another added, saved billions of lives, a third said, defeated entire fleets, a fourth whispered, discipled 6 centuries ago. Ethan listened carefully, then pointed at himself. I write parking reports. Nobody laughed. That worried him. Scientists continued their work. Holographic image suddenly appeared. Above the central table, the image showed a man wearing ancient armor. He stood before a battlefield filled with burning spacecraft. Although the armor was unfamiliar, something about the face made Ethan uncomfortable, not because it looked identical, because it looked similar, far too similar. The same eyes, the same jawline, the clear throat, same expression. Lyra slowly turned toward him. You see it too? Ethan nodded. Neither of them liked what they were seeing. Before anyone could speak further, alarms suddenly echoed through the chamber. Red lights flashed. The scientists looked confused. One technician checked a console, then his eyes widened. That's impossible. What happened? Lyra asked. The technician pointed toward a massive archive crystal. In the center of the room, ancient symbols were appearing across its surface, symbols that hadn't activated in centuries. The crystal glowed brighter and brighter. Then a beam of golden light erupted upward. Every display in the room immediately shut down. A deep voice echoed through the chamber, not from speakers, not from machines, from the archive itself. Language was ancient. Most people didn't understand it, but Ethan did. The words entered his mind with perfect clarity. The voice said only one sentence. Air has returned. The golden light vanished. Silence filled the chamber. Every person present stared at Ethan. His heart pounded because he had never heard that language before, and yet somehow he had understood every word. Nobody spoke for nearly 10 seconds. The silence felt heavier than any sound. Ethan remained seated beneath the dormant archive crystal while dozens of scientists stared at him as though he had personally stepped out of a history book. Finally, one of the researchers whispered, "It spoke." Another nodded. The archive actually spoke. A third scientist looked close to tears. "I've worked here for 82 years. Everyone turned toward him. "You don't look 82. "Thank you. How old are you?" 82. The room fell silent again. Verillian medicine was clearly impressive. Lyra rubbed her forehead. We have bigger problems. Everyone reluctantly agreed. The archive. Crystal stood motionless now, its golden light gone, yet the atmosphere inside the chamber had completely changed. Moments earlier, Ethan had merely been an unexpected genetic anomaly. Now an ancient machine had identified him as an heir, whatever that meant. One of the senior historians approached cautiously. You understood the message? Ethan nodded. One turban. I did. How? I have absolutely no idea. The historian looked disappointed. Apparently, that wasn't the answer he wanted. A few moments later, Ethan was escorted into a secure conference room. Deep within the Hall of Records, the chamber overlooked the floating Capitol. Through enormous transparent walls, far below, thousands of lights illuminated the city. Unfortunately, thousands of lights also illuminated giant holographic versions of Ethan's face. News coverage had somehow become even worse. One screen displayed a dramatic recreation of the Plaza incident. The actor portraying Ethan looked suspiciously heroic. The actor portraying Lyra looked 7 feet tall. Lyra noticed it too. I'm not that tall. You look very intimidating. I look ridiculous. The recreation version of her pointed dramatically at Ethan while explosions occurred in the background. There weren't any explosions. There are now, Ethan said. She laughed despite herself. The tension eased for a moment. Then the doors opened. Several high-ranking officials entered, including the woman in silver robes from earlier. She placed a crystal device onto the table. Officer Cross, Ethan is fine. The woman nodded. Ethan, her expression was serious. The archive crystal is activated only 6 times in recorded history. That sounds important. It is, and all 6 times it identified individuals connected to Archon Val. Room became quiet. Ethan leaned back. So who exactly was this guy? The officials exchanged looks. The woman touched the crystal device. A holographic image appeared. Above the table, a vast battlefield filled the air. Ancient warships stretched across the stars. Entire fleets burned. Worlds shattered. At the center stood the armored figure Ethan had already seen. Archon Val, the legendary warrior. The image shifted, showing victories, battles, diplomatic meetings, ancient civilizations. He ended the void wars. The woman said he united 12 species. He prevented the collapse of the core systems. Ethan stared at the images. Sounds busy. History credits him with saving the galaxy. Ethan sighed. No pressure then. Nobody smiled. Apparently historical legends were serious business. The hologram suddenly changed again. This time the image became distorted. Fragments vanished. Entire sections disappeared. Corrupted data spread across the projection. The officials frowned. That's strange. What is? Ethan asked. The woman pointed. These records shouldn't be damaged. Another historian activated additional displays. More corruption appeared. Missing files, deleted archives, redacted reports, entire decades removed from history. The room grew uneasy. Lyra stepped closer. Someone erased this. The officials looked shocked. That impossible. Not impossible, Ethan said. Quietly, everyone turned toward him. He had spent years as an investigator. People lied. Records disappeared. Evidence got buried. Technology changed. Human nature didn't. If clear's throat. Somebody wanted to hide the truth. Ethan continued, history would be the first thing they'd attack. The room became silent because everyone knew he was right. A warning tone suddenly echoed through the chamber. One of the technicians looked at his console. His face immediately lost color. What now? Lyra asked. The technician swallowed. We just detected unauthorized access. Attempts. To what? The technician looked toward the archive. Levels below, the Archon Valley's records. The room froze. Someone was trying to access the files right now, and judging by the technician's expression, whoever it was had already gotten inside. Within seconds, the calm atmosphere inside the conference chamber vanished. Officials rushed toward their consoles. Historians abandoned their seats. Scientists began arguing simultaneously. Ethan immediately felt more comfortable, or every government in the galaxy apparently handled emergencies exactly the same way. Can someone explain what's happening? He asked. Technician looked up from his station. Someone breached the protected archive network. Can we stop them? We're trying. Good. The technician hesitated. They're winning. Less good. Red warning symbols flashed across multiple displays. Far below the conference level, security barriers activated throughout the hall of records, massive energy shields, sealed corridors, autonomous defense. Drones emerged from hidden compartments in the walls. The entire building suddenly looked less like a museum and more like a fortress. Lyra checked the status feed on her wrist device. Access point located. Everyone turned toward her. Where? The restricted archive sector. Several historians immediately looked horrified. One elderly researcher grabbed the edge of a table. Know what? Ethan asked. The historian swallowed. That's where the original records are stored. The room became silent. Not copies, not backups. Originals, 600-year-old historical records. If someone wanted to erase the truth forever, that would be the place to do it. The woman in silver robes made a decision. Security teams are already moving. A military officer nodded. They'll reach the archive level in 3 minutes. Ethan stood. Then let's go. Several officials stared at him. The officer blinked. Go where? To the archive level. This is a dangerous situation. Ethan folded his arms. I'm a police officer. The officer frowned. Human police, still police. The officer looked unconvinced. Lyra stood up. I'm going to. The room immediately protested. No, absolutely not. Terrible idea. Lyra raised an eyebrow. I literally work in law enforcement. That's not the point. What is the point? The officials struggled to answer. Eventually, one scientist spoke. If something happens to either of you, the news channels will destroy us. Ethan couldn't argue with that logic. A few minutes later, they were riding a security elevator, descending toward the deepest levels of the hall. Alongside them traveled 4 armed officers. Nobody spoke much. The atmosphere was tense until one of the guards glanced awkwardly at Ethan. Can I ask a question? Ethan sighed. You're going to ask if I'm the great warrior? Actually, no. The guard looked embarrassed. I wanted to know if the stories about him punching a warship are true. Ethan stared. A what? A warship with his fist? Yes. Ethan looked toward Lyra. She shrugged. I've heard that story too. The guard nodded enthusiastically. My grandfather swore it happened. Ethan rubbed his forehead. If I ever punch a warship, please arrest me. The elevator doors opened. The lower archive sector stretched before them, unlike the upper levels. This place felt ancient, massive. Crystal pillars lined the corridors. Symbols glowed across metallic walls. The architecture looked older than anything Ethan had seen on Verlia. Almost forgotten, the security team advanced carefully, their scanners. Search for intruders, nothing. No movement, no life signs, no heat. Signatures, the corridor was empty, too. Empty, Ethan felt his instincts activating. Years of investigative work had taught him when something felt wrong. This definitely felt wrong. They reached the central archive chamber. The enormous door stood partially open. Security officer cursed quietly. The doors should have been impossible to breach, yet someone had opened them. Inside, thousands of ancient memory crystals floated in suspended energy. Fields, most remained untouched. One did not. At the center of the room, a single crystal glowed with unstable red light. Everyone stopped. What's happening? Lyra asked. A technician scanned the crystal remotely. His expression changed instantly. Oh no, what? The intruder didn't steal information. The room fell silent. They uploaded something. Ethan felt a chill. That was worse, much worse, because stealing data meant hiding the truth. Changing data meant creating a new truth. Suddenly the red crystal pulsed. Ancient symbols spread across nearby displays. Files began opening automatically. Records changed before their eyes. Names disappeared. Dates shifted. Entire events rewrote themselves. History was being altered in real time. Then every screen in the chamber displayed the same image. Black symbol, unknown, unfamiliar, deliberately erased from history. The moment Ethan saw it, a sharp pain shot through his head. Images flashed across his mind. Stars, warships, fire, a voice, a warning. The sensation vanished as quickly as it appeared. Ethan staggered. Lyra caught his arm. What happened? He stared at the symbol, his pulse racing for reasons he couldn't explain. He knew he had seen it before, not in this life but somewhere, buried inside the impossible memories, awakening within him. And whatever that symbol represented, it had once been the enemy of Archon Val. The black symbol vanished from the displays. The red crystal dimmed for several moments. Nobody moved. Ethan continued staring at the empty screen where the image had appeared. His pulse slowly returned to normal, yet the strange sensation remained, a feeling that he had almost remembered something important, something enormous. Lyra studied him carefully. You recognized it. It wasn't a question. Ethan exhaled. I think I did. The officers exchanged uneasy looks. One historian stepped closer. From where? I don't know. You don't? No, I've never seen it before. The historian looked confused. Ethan was confused too. That was the problem. Memory had felt real, far too real, as if it belonged to someone else, or perhaps someone who had lived centuries ago. The thought made him uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. The security team secured the archive chamber while technicians began restoring damaged records. Meanwhile, specialists examined the altered crystal. Their findings only deepened the mystery. No trace of the intruder remained. No biological evidence, no digital signature, no network trail, nothing. The person responsible had effectively appeared, rewritten history, and vanished. That level of sophistication frightened even the experts. Several hours later, Ethan found himself sitting Inside a private research chamber, overlooking the city, outside darkness had fallen across Furelia, the floating district sparkled beneath countless streams of light. Traffic moved through the sky like rivers of stars. Normally, the view would have been relaxing. Tonight it wasn't. The door slid open. Lyra entered carrying 2 cups. She handed one to Ethan. What is it? A local drink. He examined the glowing blue liquid suspiciously. It looks radioactive. It isn't. That's not a very reassuring answer. Lyra laughed. Trust me. Ethan took a cautious sip. His eyes widened. Okay, that's actually good. See what is it made from? Lyra hesitated. Ethan immediately lowered the cup. What is it made from? A fungus. Ethan stared at her. She burst out laughing. Moment later, she admitted she was joking. Probably. He wasn't entirely sure. For a while they simply sat together watching the city. The silence wasn't uncomfortable after everything that had happened. It felt surprisingly normal. Eventually Lyra spoke. Do you ever wish none of this happened? Ethan immediately nodded. Every hour. She smiled. I suspected that I came here for a cultural exchange program. He gestured toward the city. Now half the planet thinks I'm a dead war hero. Technically, they think you're connected to him. That's somehow worse. Lyra laughed. Again, the sound eased some of the pressure hanging over both of them. Then a notification appeared on Ethan's tablet. Another one followed. Then 20 more. He frowned. What now? Lyra looked at the screen. Her expression immediately changed. Oh, what? The media found your old service records. Ethan closed his eyes. No. Yes. She began scrolling. The article says you solved 32 major criminal cases. So it also says you once disarmed a terrorist while holding a sandwich. Ethan groaned. I was eating lunch. Apparently, the public finds this very inspiring. A moment later, another notification appeared. Then another. Then another. Lyra started laughing so hard she nearly dropped her drink. What? She turned the tablet toward him. A newly published article filled the screen. Great warrior's favorite Earth combat technique revealed. What? Ethan opened it. The article referenced the sandwich incident. His expression darkened. They think sandwiches are tactical equipment. Lyra completely lost control and started laughing again. Even Ethan couldn't help smiling. The moment passed quickly because another alert appeared. This one came directly from the Hall of Records. Priority level maximum. Both of them immediately became serious. Ethan opened the message. Single line appeared and unidentified. Transmission has been decoded from the altered crystal. Below it was an attached recording. The file was ancient, far older than 6 centuries, far older than Archon Val. The recording began automatically. Static filled the room. Then a distorted voice emerged. The language was ancient. Once again, Ethan understood every word. His blood ran cold. The message contained only one sentence. The heirs are awakening. Find the sanctuary before the veil returns. The recording ended. Silence filled the room. Lyra looked at him. What did it say? Ethan slowly repeated the words. Neither of them liked how they sounded. Because one thing had become painfully clear. Someone wasn't merely changing history. Someone was preparing for something, and whatever the veil was, it was coming back. The message changed everything. Within hours, the Hall of Records assembled its greatest historians, scientists, and archivists. Using fragments recovered from the altered crystal, they pieced together a truth that had been hidden for centuries. The veil was not a person, it was not an army, it was an organization, a secret faction that had survived since the final years of the Void Wars. Their purpose had been simple: control history, erase knowledge, manipulate civilizations. Whenever a discovery threatened their influence, records vanished, heroes disappeared from archives, entire events were rewritten, even Ark and become one of their targets. The legendary warrior had uncovered their existence centuries ago. Before he vanished, he created a safeguard, a genetic legacy, not a clone, not a resurrection, a warning system. Someone in the future would inherit fragments of his knowledge if the veil ever returned. That someone was Ethan Cross. The realization felt strangely peaceful. For days he had struggled against the legend. Now he finally understood. He was never supposed to become Archon Val. He was supposed to remain himself. That was the entire point. The breakthrough came when scientists discovered a hidden archive buried beneath the hall itself. The sanctuary mentioned in the message. Deep below the city rested a sealed chamber, untouched for 600 years. Only Ethan could open it, not because he was the legendary warrior, because he carried the genetic key Archon had prepared. The ancient vault awakened as Ethan approached. Golden symbols illuminated the walls. Massive doors slowly opened. Inside waited a final recording. The image of Archon Val appeared. The room became silent. For the first time, Ethan saw the legendary warrior move and speak. The resemblance was undeniable. Yet they were not the same. Archon smiled. If you're seeing this, then the veil has returned. The recording explained everything. The organization had spent centuries rewriting history to maintain control over countless worlds. Archon could not destroy them entirely. Instead, he exposed their leadership and hid evidence across the galaxy. The sanctuary contained the final proof. Names, locations, records, enough evidence to reveal the veil to every major civilization. The moment the archive activated, the information automatically transmitted across interstellar networks. The veil's greatest weapon, secrecy, vanished. Just like that, across the galaxy, governments began making arrests. Hidden leaders were exposed. False records were corrected. Lost history returned. The organization collapsed within days, not because of a war, not because of a super weapon, because the truth finally became public. When the crisis ended, Velia erupted into celebration. This time, however, something felt different. People no longer looked at Ethan as if he were a ghost from history. They looked at him as himself, the human police officer who had helped uncover centuries of lies. One evening, several weeks later, Ethan stood on a viewing platform overlooking the floating capital. The city glowed beneath the stars. Traffic streams crossed the night sky like rivers of light. Beside him stood Lyra. Neither spoke for a while. The silence felt comfortable, peaceful. Finally, Lyra smiled. So you accidentally became one of the most famous people in the galaxy. Ethan sighed. I was trying. Very clear's throat. Hard not to. You failed spectacularly. She laughed. The sound carried softly through the night air. A notification suddenly appeared on Ethan's communicator. He checked it, then groaned. Lyra immediately became curious. What happened? he showed her. The screen, a news article had just been published, the great warrior's favorite sandwich finally revealed. Lyra nearly fell over laughing. They still think that story is important. Apparently, more important than saving galactic history. Neither of them could stop laughing. For the first time since arriving on Velia, Ethan felt completely relaxed. The mystery was solved, the truth had been restored, the loose threads of history had finally been tied together. He had arrived as an ordinary visitor, expecting a routine exchange program. Instead, he had uncovered a forgotten conspiracy, restored centuries of lost knowledge, and discovered that greatness was not about legends, it was about choices. Far below, the lights of the city shimmered like stars. Ethan looked out across the horizon and smiled. His journey had begun with a simple identity check, and somehow that had changed an entire galaxy.